Hello Internet, Seth Skorkowski, and today we'll be taking a look at the traveler adventure, A Dagger at Efate. Written by John Lewis, the scenario first appeared in the Journal of the Traveler's Aid Society No. 8 in 1981. It was later updated for Mongoose 2nd edition and re-released in JTAS Volume 4 in 2019, which is the version that I ran. The adventure is an Amber Zone adventure, meaning that it isn't a full adventure module or anything. It's more like a rough outline, requiring that the referee fill in many of the details. The original adventure is only 2 pages long, and the new one is only 4 pages long, and a good chunk of that being art and handout, as well as them being these kind of small, half-size pages here, so it is a pretty short adventure. The hook is that the travelers are sent to investigate a runaway starship that's on a collision course for a planet. This is going to require that the travelers have their own spaceship in order to do the adventure, and they're probably going to want to have a few skills in vac suit and some of the various electronic skills. I added quite a bit to this adventure when I ran it. In fact, once I was done with it, it really wasn't too recognizable from the original adventure. Part of those changes were in order for us to work it into the campaign that we were playing at the time, such as the location. I also changed the type of ship that it was, but even with the modifications that I made and everything that I added, the whole adventure only took us about 3 hours to complete. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. My thoughts, my criticisms, and my suggestions as a game master who has successfully run this adventure. And I'm Jack the NPC. I'm here to give it to you from a player's side of things as I get to relive that time I was on a runaway nuclear bomb. Not exactly the type of memory that I was wanting to relive anytime soon, but Seth says that's what he pays me for, so here I am. But before we go any further, I must warn you that there will be spoilers. So any players in the audience, please stop here. Send your game masters this way to see about running the adventure for you. But if you keep watching and you spoil yourself, you'll get sent out an airlock without a suit. Okay, Game Masters, let's do this. As I said, the adventure is more of an outline than a fleshed-out adventure module. The original adventure, which this is it in its entirety, was mostly there to introduce the Mercenary Cruiser, a popular ship that was first introduced in JTAS No. 8, so this was sort of an excuse on how a referee could introduce this new ship to their group. As the title implies, the adventure is set in the system of Efate, a high-tech world located in the Spinward Marches. However, there's no particular reason why you actually need to set it here if a different world might work better for your campaign. For example, in mine, we were playing in the island subsector of the Great Rift, and I set it at Buzanson, which is a great location just due to the political turmoil and the rival nations and all throughout these subsectors there. I really love the island subsectors, by the way. The plot is that several months ago, the mercenary cruiser Dagger went missing. Now, Game Masters, I recommend that you kind of foreshadow this if you can. Maybe there's a news bulletin or some rumors or something that the travelers get, maybe 2 sessions before you actually run this adventure. Go ahead and lay your groundwork if at all possible. Or, better yet, have it be where the ship's crew of the Dagger is someone that the travelers are familiar with. Like, maybe there's some friends, or maybe they're possibly rivals that are aboard this ship. That way this becomes more of a personal interest to them because these are now characters that they know, someone that their characters care about or might want to know where they are. So have your players know about these missing characters as NPCs that they're familiar with, if at all possible, because that will only make this adventure better. The adventure begins when the travelers arrive in the Efate system, possibly heading toward the planet like they just jumped in here. The new version of this adventure gives us a handout of different news bulletins concerning the escalating violence in the system. Maybe they learn about this before they jump to the system, like maybe they're delivering some supplies for the war effort and they're well aware of the conditions there. Or maybe they just jump through this system, they arrive, and this only comes in through the wires, various news articles that they missed out on over the past week while they were in jump space, so all of a sudden they now know that this place is pretty hot. Hey guys, this bulletin just came in and it says that the Efate system is a hot zone right now, so I say we steer clear of that place and avoid it at all costs. What do you mean we're in the Efate system? What did I just tell you? We should be avoiding that place. Ah, damn. Meanwhile, this huge battle is raging at the far side of the system, and Imperial Command has sent every available ship there to fight. Maybe even the Travelers, maybe they're initially ordered to fight because they might have some weapons on their ship, or maybe they're in the Scout Services, and Scout Services kind of allows the Imperium to send them off on a mission because they've been flying around in a scout ship. But maybe they arrive and all of a sudden they're being told that they got to go fight in a war. But then the Dagger jumps into this system and starts flying straight toward the planet. The starport radios the Travelers that the Dagger isn't altering its course or returning any hails, and it might be in need of assistance. The Travelers, being the closest ship to the Dagger, are asked, or per interstellar law, are sent to go investigate and see if they can help the Dagger out. As all the other ships in the area are currently engaged in all the fighting, the Travelers are the only ones that they can send to do it. Hey guys, it looks like we got a reprieve here and ain't got to go into battle and get shot at. Sounds like some mercenary cruises flying around and ain't returning radio calls, and we're getting sent to check it out. Lucky us. Now, of course, you can make the stakes a lot higher here if the Travelers know the crew of the Dagger, giving them a much more personal interest in this. For my game, I made a few changes here. First, while mercenary cruisers are pretty cool, I decided to go with the 1,000-ton exploration vessel from the Great Rift box set. Reason being that our campaign was taking place in the Great Rift, and also because this ship is just so different than any of the ones that my players might be familiar with if they've been going through the normal Traveler books. It also has a lot of decks to it, as well as 2 separate ways to access the bridge, which I thought may be kind of fun if they've got different ways that they could get there. Now what's happening is that the Dagger was captured by the enemy and is now being sent on a suicide run toward the planet. The controls to the ship have been wrecked and its flight course has been pre-programmed into this lobotomized ship's computer that's not really capable of anything else. So this thing is just essentially one gigantic missile. Now the ship does have enough maneuver drive. I gave it 1 point of maneuver. That way it's kind of difficult for the Travelers to dock with because it's going to kind of move a little bit and try to prevent them from trying to dock with the ship, but it's only got 1 point of thrust, so it's not going to be impossible for the Travelers to get aboard. I also decided that I'd go ahead and give the ship a single automated turret, just add a little bit of risk to it as the ship, opens up fire with only one of its turrets, and that led to an interesting development when we were playing because I managed to hit the Traveler ship just as the Travelers are trying to dock with it. And he rolled a critical hit against our maneuver drive, rolled it right there in front of us, otherwise we probably wouldn't have believed that he legitimately did that. Now that don't sound like no big deal, except for the fact that our ship, it only had a thrust of 1, so that critical hit completely killed our drive. Anyway, Seth let us finish out that combat round, and our pilot managed to force a docking with the Dagger, though we had a Bane die in order to do it, so that was great. We were now able to board the ship. However, because we don't have a maneuver drive no more, we were now locked in course with this runaway ship. This was one of those moments that was unplanned but just worked out perfectly in the middle of the game because now the Travelers were completely committed that they had to go through with this adventure because they weren't going to be able to escape from it. And if I had even thought about doing it like that before I ran the adventure, I might have intentionally set it up that way because it worked beautifully. Also, one other thing about the Dagger is that there is a nuclear bomb hidden aboard. Now, discovering the bomb should be a surprise once they've already boarded the Dagger, but for my game, my players had a very advanced sensor suite aboard their ship, so it was able to do a lot more than a standard sensor suite, and they made a killer sensors roll when they were checking it out, so I told them that, yeah, they were picking up the signature of an armed nuclear device aboard somewhere on the aft section of the top deck. So they didn't know exactly where this nuke was, but they knew that it was on the ship, and they had kind of a good idea of where it's going to be found. Now this bomb is said to be a 1 destructive die nuke, and it will detonate if any large ship that's 1,000 tons or more approaches it. But 1 DD is pretty small and not likely to take out a large ship like that, so for my game I swapped this out with a pocket nuke, which is a 6 destructive die bomb, making this thing a whole lot worse. Also, I had most of the hatches to get aboard the Dagger be welded shut, meaning that the Travelers couldn't use certain airlocks in order to get aboard, or maybe they would have to figure out which one they could, manage to get open with the right rolls, or maybe hotwire one of the cargo doors and able to get in through one of the cargo doors aboard the ship, something like that. But it wasn't going to be as easy to get aboard as just simply getting to any old airlock. The reason for that being is that the people that did all this, they didn't want it to be easy for anybody to get aboard the ship. So they probably just, left the one airlock that they evacuated the ship on, as that might be the only one that they still had access to, while the rest of them had just been welded shut from the inside. Also, I personally just wanted the travelers to have to go through several decks in order to reach the ship's bridge. I wanted them to have to go through this entire ship rather than just being able to choose the airlock that was the closest to the bridge. Now, inside the ship, everything should just be stripped. Anything of any value has just been taken out of this place and looted. No beds, no sinks, no water pump, no nothing. Even the power plant and drives, I stripped down to the bare minimum that were needed to do this adventure. And while I left the ship pressurized so there was still atmosphere aboard the ship, I disabled the gravity so the travelers had to float down the passages and deal with zero G as they were making their way through the ship. I also decided to add some sentry turrets to this place, just like in Aliens. I put 3 of these things on the ship, each bolted to the deck at a key location. Now, they were dumb and responded to only movement, and stats that I gave them were simply machine guns with extra large magazines. And those things were a lot of fun, because once we figured out that they were motion activated, we started throwing all sorts of trash and debris at them and tried to get that motion sense's attention. And then once the turret, kind of started turning away from us and shooting at the trash, we'd pop out from behind a wall and blast it in the ass. It was a hoot. Now, depending on your own game, if the bad guys are of a high enough tech level to do this, you can use smarter sentry guns, or maybe they've got laser turrets versus just machine guns, or maybe even there's some combat robots that they've left aboard for the travelers to fight while they're going through all this zero G, trying to make their way to the bridge. Now, eventually they should make their way to the bridge, and there they're going to discover that the flight controls and the comms have been completely smashed and gutted, and everything has been taken out of this place. Trying to fix this would take 36 hours of time, but the Dagger is going to crash into the planet in only 8 hours, so they don't have the time to fix this. Now, it's also at this time that the travelers, if they're checking some of these wires that are leading out of the sensor array and kind of going off the floor, and maybe through an air duct or something like that, they're going to discover this armed nuke that's aboard this place. And this portion really reminds me of Season 5 of The Expanse, or Nemesis games for fans of the books, where Naomi is trapped aboard a runaway ship that's been gutted and wired with explosives, and she has to figure a way of steering this thing without having any of the controls. How the travelers solve all this is completely up to them. The module suggests that they might try to fool the sensors into changing course, or possibly hacking this damaged computer and altering its program. Unfortunately, the adventure doesn't offer us the difficulty level or the time required to do either of these things. Personally, just due to the jury-rigged nature of this system, where everything's just kind of held together with duct tape and nothing's really doing the job that it was originally intended to do because it's just so stripped down, I suggest that you make this pretty hard. Like, start this out at difficulty 12. But maybe if the travelers, take their time trying to fix this problem, maybe working to the last possible moment, right before they hit the point of no return and there's no way to avoid hitting the planet. So if they take that extra time, till the counter is about to hit 1, and then they make their roll, you gotta lower that down to a 10, just because it's nice and dramatic, and that adds a little bit to the excitement. Yeah, screw that. Guys, I say we just get back aboard our ship, fly away, turn around, and blast this place and nuke the whole ship from orbit. It's the only way to be sure. Unless, of course, you got a jerk game master, it took out our maneuver drive, and now we can't get away. Now, the starport does not want this ship destroyed. Now, first, the damage from space debris or a nuclear explosion going off above a high-tech world, that could be problematic for them, but more importantly, any evidence of who was responsible for this would be destroyed if the ship is destroyed, so the starport tells them to keep this ship intact because that's their only clue as to who possibly did this. This is where I was really grateful for that lucky shot where I took out the player's maneuver drive right when they docked with the ship, preventing them from getting away. So once again, Game Masters, I suggest that you might try intentionally doing this to them because it really did up the stakes. So you might want to just kind of, you can make it a regular roll, but make it a called shot roll to take out their maneuver drive because that really did add to the excitement for us. Once the travelers get control of the Dagger, the adventure is done. Now, what happens next is completely up to them and completely up to you. Now, for my game, I I had the starport direct the travelers to take the Dagger somewhere kind of deep out in the system, far away from the planet, a good safe distance in case something else happened or that bomb exploded, and there they were handed it over to a large military vessel that could then begin their investigation as to who did this and who got the nuke and why they were doing it. The travelers I also turned into these local heroes once they made it down planet side, and they should be entitled to some sort of reward for doing all this, maybe a flat fee, or maybe the salvage rights on the ship, or a percentage of the salvage rights on the ship, or whatever it is you find most appropriate for your game. At the very least, we should be getting free drinks at every bar we go to. Forever. If you went with my idea of having the travelers know the crew of the Dagger, where these might be friends or allies of theirs, they might be interested in discovering who did this to their ship and what happened to their friends. Maybe having to stage some sort of rescue or retaliation in case their friends might have been killed. Sending the travelers off in some distant future adventure somewhere in order to get revenge or get their friends back. Overall, we had a lot of fun with this scenario. It served as a good, quick way to inject some excitement to a session, as the heroes are going from just doing a standard cargo run to, suddenly riding a runaway bomb, and there was no warning at all. This just happened to them. My biggest criticism of it is I feel that it could have offered us a little bit more as far as obstacles that we find aboard this ship, or information about the condition of the ship and, different things that they might encounter there, and what all it is that they find aboard, such as, removing gravity, or welding most of the entrances shut, or adding the auto sentries, different things like that. Yes, it is a short Amber Zone adventure, and I really shouldn't expect too much from those, but we used a full page as a handout that I didn't even use in my game, and I feel that that space could have been better spent on obstacles and information to make this adventure far more exciting. You can find the adventure in the Journal of the Traveler's Aid Society Volume 4 on DriveThruRPG in PDF, or in physical print on the Mongoose website. While the adventure might not be the best, I definitely consider the JTAS volumes worth checking out. Just due to everything else that's inside of them, they are definitely worth your time. Hey, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up. If you want to see some more of our stuff, such as game reviews, RPG philosophy, just hit that subscribe button. Till next time, travelers, you have a great day. What I think would be pretty cool is, let's say you got a traveler campaign going on, but you wrap that one up and you end up starting a new one. So, in this new campaign, the player characters, they arrive in a system and they get a call that there's a runaway ship that's not returning any radio hails. But instead of it being the Dagger, it ends up that that's the ship that those players used in their previous campaign. So now the players, they're all like, what the hell's going on here? That's our ship. So they get aboard it and they find that everything has been stripped out of it, and the player characters, the former player characters, are nowhere to be seen. So now the players, they got a vested interest in this. They got to find out what happened. Who did this to their ship and what happened to their previous player characters? I think that could be fun.